If there's something that makes a young person different, coming from a minority culture or religion, being an immigrant, having a handicap, what would be normal adolescent growing pains can often turn into debilitating lifelong scars. Although there have been strides towards tolerance for various differences, homosexuality remains low on the list. Along with verbal abuse and physical bashing, lesbian and gay youth suffer from invisibility, isolation, and ostracism more than any of their peers. Statistics reveal that 30 to 40% of all teen suicides are among homosexual youth. I'm Eileen Karn. On this edition of Forward and Out, I welcome Nancy Aidala, a teacher at Horace Greeley High School in Chappaqua, New York. She has integrated homosexuality into her health education curriculum. Welcome, Nancy.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming on the show and sharing this important information with us.
Thanks.
You've really been a groundbreaker in Chappaqua, bringing this curriculum into your classes. Can you tell us how that got started and what your motivation was?
I think this has evolved through, I've been at Chappaqua for 7 years, and I've always discussed sexual orientation issues in my health course. But in recent years, I was not real sure that I was really being effective. And I found that many of us were aware of gay, lesbian issues, were aware of some of the at-risk issues for these kids, but nobody was out there teaching how to teach it. What are really interactive, dynamic activities that you can do to really get at homophobia and heterosexist attitudes?
In other words, everyone was talking about the problem,
right,
but nobody was coming up with concrete solutions or things that could be done within the school context.
Yeah. So I really sort of canvassed everything. I bought every curriculum I could find. I read a lot of books. I had friends helping me, and we put together a curriculum and some activities. My feeling and my experience talking to colleagues who teach health is that a lot of people want to do stuff, but there are 3,000 things that we have to teach. And if somebody would say, here's 1 or 3-day lesson that's great, many of us would do it. And
Did
it wasn't
you
readily
find this
available.
challenging when you started to evolve and move in this direction, that it was challenging your own attitudes?
Yes,
About
and it was exciting.
homosexuality?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
The more
how
that
was
I did,
process? What was
well,
that?
the more that I did, the more I realized. Although I think that I am not homophobic, I realized heterosexism just sort of creeps in many places that I didn't realize. And as I became more and more in tuned, I realized more places in the curriculum beyond just sexuality that I could not be so specifically oriented male-female. If I do rape prevention strategies, am I always saying male-female? So the guy, instead I try to say that the partners are 2 people. I mean, there's a lot of little examples like that.
Right, a lot of it is in the language.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
how concepts and things are brought together.
Right.
Yeah, I think we were talking about AIDS and gayness always being associated in people's minds, but not really in the reality of the disease at all. And yet,
Right. No, and that was another thing. A lot of people, even the State Department, came out with a curriculum that they pulled back on AIDS. And in it they had, this was in 89, I think, 87, 89, they came out and said, no, it was updated in 91, and they had a lesson on homophobia, which I applaud that the State Department said, gee, you need to look at these issues, but not when you're talking about AIDS. That reinforces to the gay population a very negative death connection. And it reinforces to heterosexuals that see it really as a gay disease, which it clearly is not. One of the things I say to kids or to anybody that I work with, everybody is at risk for AIDS once you become sexually active. So I was sorry to see that, because a lot of people will look at that curriculum and say, okay, let me in the middle of AIDS do a lesson on homophobia. That's not helpful.
Right. What grades do you teach?
I teach 10th grade. It's the mandated health course. You can teach it, it depends on the district, anywhere between 9th and 12th grade. We have 10th
So that's
grade.
the group that you deal with. How about discussing the actual curriculum itself? It's really quite fascinating. Their first part of it is really addressed towards the teachers, right? That how the teachers can themselves create a homophobic environment.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples of what's recommended there?
Well, one of the things that I've done is I've done trainings for health teachers, but I've also sort of expanded that, and I've done workshops for teachers in general. And there are things when I talk to the more general population, do we attack homophobic remarks just as quickly as we do racist remarks in the cafeteria? Do we, just as quickly in the classroom if someone says a gay joke, do we say, that's not okay, I don't want to hear that, just as much as I do if anyone says a religious joke? If you have posters of all kinds of current issues, do you include posters of gay and lesbian issues? Do you, just as clearly, do you find in yourself, are you asking students, do you have a boyfriend, do you have a girlfriend? Instead of, are you involved with someone? A lot of it is language and starting to look at things that we can all do.
Right, to be inclusive and not make assumptions about people.
Right, to include gay and lesbian literature in English classes, to talk about how homosexuals were persecuted in Nazi Germany. You know, many social studies teachers will leave that out, and it certainly shouldn't be. So there's little places that
in different parts of the general students' exposure, they could be getting a lot more.
And a lot of times the work also has to involve teachers. Unfortunately, in our society, whether you're students or teachers, some of the teachers are very homophobic. And do we, as colleagues, and does the administration clearly say that's not okay? And I've started to see some changes, and I think that's certainly positive.
Well, certainly teachers are models for
Absolutely.
the students, especially if parental roles are missing, or so they're really modeling.
And I can remember my
adults.
first year teaching almost 10 years ago, somebody telling me one way to stop male horseplay was to basically be homophobic and say to the boys, come on, you're getting too close, don't do that.
Oh,
What a hurtful, what a horrible thing,
throw them,
you know, to say. So I try to
stereotype and expect them to react against it because of homophobia.
Right.
I'm glad you're here, Nancy, doing this work. The next part is doing a homophobic scale. So you actually ask the students in this 10th grade class to review their own feelings, right? How does that work? What sort of questions?
Well, that's the one activity I don't use a whole lot, but sometimes I'll use it because as an introduction, if a homosexual sat down next to you on the bus, how would you feel? If your teacher was gay, how would you feel? And it gets at a lot of, first of all, how would you know? Which is usually the kids will come up with that, and then they'll say, well, I'd be nervous. Why would you be nervous? And you get into many stereotypes, such as a gay or lesbian. If a woman sits next to me and she's lesbian, she's going to want me. So you try to pull out some of the myths and some of the stereotypes that we all have, or many of us have, just growing up, even if we haven't meant to be hurtful.
Right. And a very powerful way is included in your curriculum, imagery exercise.
I love that.
Yeah. How does that work?
It's one of the, I think, most effective things that you can use to get all people to take a look at what it must be like to be a minority, to be invisible, to not know who you're okay, and to get tons of negative messages. And it's been altered many, many times, but the idea came from Brian McNaught, who wrote On Being Gay. And it basically asks everyone to pretend they're heterosexual. And however, you're in an all-gay world. Everybody's
so it's a complete
gay,
reverse.
and you better be gay. But you're still you, if you're heterosexual, so pretend.
Pretend.
And then it goes through from very young, through what you feel like, how these feelings, how everybody, including the Flintstones, are gay, but you don't feel that way. And it takes it all the way through high school, the loneliness, the struggles, to finally sort of breaking through that and making a connection with other heterosexuals and how you feel inside, yes, this is what I want to be, or this is what I am, not even what I want to be. But you can't be that openly. And it just kind of goes on and on. It takes a good 10, 15 minutes.
So what is it like? The students have their eyes closed and they're listening to your voice?
I use a lot of
And as
imagery anyway, with a number of places. So by the time we get to this activity, I say we're going to do an imagery, and the kids go,
They love
they
that.
love it. And you turn down the lights, and I read it, and really encourage them to go with the fantasy. Some of them will get stuck. Well, then you wouldn't have other people in the world. Well, then you go to a sperm bank. It would work out. And at the end, I have the kids write for 10 minutes, just what that was
Once
like.
the exercise is finished, they just go to the pen.
Right, and that's very insightful. And a lot of students will say, I didn't realize it was like that. Some will deny and say, I don't think it's really like that for gays or lesbians. And I'll say, well, I've shared it with anyone I've ever met who's told me they're gay or lesbian, and they say, although not everyone can relate to every incident in the imagery, but yes, that is what it's like, and it is terrible.
Right. What about that video, the Brian McNaught video?
He has a video on being gay, which is
modeled
wonderful.
after the book?
Yes,
Is that right?
it's really just him talking, and I've recommended, and it's relatively inexpensive for teachers to use it in teacher training. It's a little bit too long, and it gets a little bit dry for students, but it does a wonderful job of really educating somebody who knows very little about homosexuality, about sexual orientation issues.
Right.
So it's a good resource.
Yes, Another part of your curriculum is the heterosexism questionnaire.
Yes, that's another.
Yeah, so that's a list of questions,
Right.
which are
And
gauging.
it's a role reversal again.
Another
it's that same
role
idea.
reversal.
I ask for males and females to come up and pretend they're heterosexual, to sit down, and then I say to them all kinds of role reversals. To a male who's heterosexual, I'll say, well, if you've never been with another male, how do you know that's not what you wouldn't prefer? And what about child abuse? And you go after many of the different stereotypes that people have, and kids get it. They really get like, oh, this is absurd. And I say, but that's what we say to gays. It says, are you sure this isn't a phase? Don't you think you just haven't met the right person yet? How did you know? And I even start with that. I say, how did you know you were heterosexual? And it's great when you have kids say different things. Some kids will say, I don't know. It just kind of always was. Somebody else say, well, I remember there was this person. And, boy, I remember in third grade. And others will say, I just am. That's what my parents told me. But we never ask heterosexuals to explain that, but we do say that to gay or lesbian students. We say, are you sure?
Right, yeah. How do you know if you're
Right.
Yeah, with another
And maybe
partner.
you just haven't met the right person, or maybe you've had a bad experience, and none of that has really shown to be true.
Do you have a way of gauging the success of your program, or how it has reached the goals that you want in terms of changing homophobic attitudes?
It's tough to do. Part of this has come through students who've come back to me, who I've taught 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, who've come back and said, I'm gay or I'm lesbian, and can't you do more? Can't the schools do more? Boy, I remember going here, and I hated it. And they don't remember too much about the health course, but they think, can't you start a group, or is there something you could do?
Because they remember what you did in the health class.
Well, they remember that I was somewhat approachable and that we did some things. Some of them will remember this. I've also had in the last few years a few students come out to me and have said, thank you for having that poster or addressing this and not letting it become a bashing kind of experience in the class. Every now and then some classes there'll be homophobic discussions that really are very bashing, or, hurtful, and I don't allow that.
Right.
But really to evaluate it, it's tough. Some of it comes from, I think, students who have said, thank you, that was really helpful. Students, gay or heterosexual, who've written on course evaluations.
Right.
I never quite thought about that, but that really taught me, now I understand about my uncle, or I have more insight. And through their journals, I read quite a bit where kids have kind of gone through a process and had to interact with and think about the material.
Right.
But I do that throughout the course, so they're having to interact with a lot of different things.
How has the rest of the faculty and the administration at the high school responded to your curriculum?
Well, a lot of it is, it's not a new and different and radical curriculum. There's lots of things that I do that are controversial, and you never please everyone, but I think I'm pretty well respected by the faculty and the administration and given support to do what I believe is important.
Right.
I
You actually have this curriculum in a few different schools now, thanks to you, right?
Yes.
So this has been something that you put together, and then at conferences
it kind of evolved. I didn't sit down to write a curriculum, but one of the things that happened is as I started to do it, more and more people heard and have called me and have asked me. And I've done, at the state conference for health educators last year, I did a workshop on how to integrate. And I actually did and modeled all of the imagery, the heterosexism questionnaire and discussions and how I handle different things. And a lot of it is just reassuring people that if you're approachable, if a student comes out to you as gay or lesbian, it's no different than a student who comes out to me who wants to talk about being lonely or being depressed or, I know I'm being very negative, but having difficulty with parents. They just need someone to talk to, someone to listen, someone to be understanding and to give them some time and some space. And we all can do that. You don't need special training.
Right.
But a lot of teachers think, gee, I wasn't trained, I don't know what to do, what could I do?
Right. This really points the way to a lot of very good things. How about the community at large in Chappaqua? It's an affluent suburb.
Yeah.
One would think somewhat conservative, possibly politically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet you've beat out New York in the rainbow curriculum
Yeah,
by
this
doing
is
this.
true. This is true. Maybe part of that is because I haven't published it until now. But I think part of it is people believe in education and ideas. There are parents I know who occasionally will see kids writing something related to this curriculum. And I've heard from some students that their parents will say, "Oh, I think that's great. We never had that." And I've heard others who say, "Oh, why is she doing that? There's so many more important things." And nobody's banded together and said, "Gee, we need to address this." Nobody's banded together and complained about how I teach really anything for that matter, drug education or suicide prevention.
Right, the health area encompasses so much.
Yeah, I've tried to do a little bit more, and we're hoping to have our counselors trained by Hedrick Martin, an institute in New York City, about gay and lesbian issues. I hope to offer a optional training for teachers because I then believe that many of us, if we knew more, we might do things differently, might make a difference, but we just never thought about it. There's so much going on in everybody's life.
Right, yeah. I think one of the parts of education that you're really handling so well is having the teachers be aware of resources that they can direct the student to. And I know we have a little stack of books and things. It's very helpful just to have posters that are on your wall that are gay friendly or gay positive.
Absolutely.
Literature.
Books in the library.
Books in the library. Comic books. We even have comic books.
Right, right.
And then some other literature. Very important.
Right.
So that's giving a message to the student, even it's a nonverbal message.
Right.
That, and then as far as resources go, I guess you can use things like PFLAG, which is
absolutely.
Parents and Friends, which would be, helping the students' parents. And then the Loft even has a teen group. And
That's
then I
right.
guess there's things further away, Manhattan and elsewhere. So there's not a void of things.
No.
It's a perceived void if there is one, until the teacher, him or herself, is acquainted.
Right, and just what I found is not many people are out there pulling this all together and giving it to teachers. And when you teach something like health where there's lots of issues, we can just be too busy. So I've tried to really pull things together and say, here,
Right.
you could try this.
What about that rainbow curriculum? What do you think happened in New York?
Well,
here we have the notorious book.
That's right.
Heather Has Two Mommies, which was
Daddy's roommate.
Daddy's roommate. These were the ones. And I guess the rainbow curriculum was geared towards a younger student population. So that I guess got the parents.
I think part of the problem, and one of the things that's really too bad about the rainbow curriculum is, and part of it I think is the media's fault, it was not a gay lesbian curriculum. It was a curriculum of tolerance for people, all kinds of people, all kinds of religions. My goodness, what else could they need in New York City? I mean, that's wonderful. In it, they included that in the younger ages, kindergarten, first grade, when you teach about families, you need to teach that there are all kinds of families, step families and divorced families and nuclear families, extended families and gay lesbian families and all kinds of families. And nobody said you have to teach it this way, but they said you need to address that. And here are a couple of books. Use what works with your kids. Use what works with your personality. I've used these in, I read them to my high school students to bring that up and to talk really at current events. What do you think? And the kids will often say that the idea was right, in that if you really want to get at attitudes, that's the age to do it, not at high school.
Right.
I brought these books home. I have a 2- and 4-year-old child myself.
How does that go? You have a little curriculum for them?
Well, no. But I read my 4-year-old Daddy's Roommate, and it was a ride, and it was wonderful. It was a ride only in that we had such great discussions. You know, because he has 2 daddies. Well, that's kind of weird, but somebody in our neighborhood doesn't have a daddy, and why is that, Mommy?
And, so it got him thinking about anything that was different than the normal.
Right.
couple.
And sure, he asked, because in part of it, the parents were divorced. Ooh, what's that? Oh, I would never want you to go away, Mommy, or Daddy to go away. So so it involves communication. What's wrong with that? It's wonderful.
Right.
And the things that he wasn't able to understand, or my 2-year-old could care less, just goes over their head. I'm not, exposing him to anything. At his age, when I said, "Well, Mommy and Daddy aren't going to get a divorce," that was fine. That's fine. That's not his concern. I'm not doing that. He didn't start having nightmares, thinking, "Oh, I think they are, and maybe Mommy's lesbian." I mean, but people get caught up in
Oh, I
And
think their own fears being transferred, or their own.
Or
uncertainty.
people take it and think that this curriculum means I'm going to be advocating. Let's all be gay and lesbian. It's the way to be. When you talk about death education to little kids because somebody in the school died or a grandfather died, nobody's out there advocating death.
Right, right.
It's just, this is an interesting topic, how people, some people take it then and think that you're advocating and you're encouraging and you're saying this is the way to go. And
Yeah,
it's
right.
too bad.
You've been involved in sort of a national outreach around gay curriculum too. You went to a conference in Massachusetts, is that right?
Yes.
Our neighboring state up there has really made some
Massachusetts
progress.
is interesting.
Huh?
Yeah, yeah.
They have a whole governor's commission, I think, that issued a report last year.
Yes,
That
they
was
did.
the first in the nation about how do we make our schools safe.
Right.
It's a great title.
One of the things they did, which was wonderful, is they did statewide hearings, kind of a Clinton kind of thing, town meetings. What do you think? What's going on? And students talked and said, it's horrible. It's terrible. We are harassed. We are alone. Nobody's doing anything. And this commission came up with 5 recommendations. 4 of them were adopted. So now they're out training, and every school must send teachers and get trained in how to make schools safe for our lesbian and gay students.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I went to that to share some of the stuff that I did and to see what they're doing and to find out how they're actually implementing some of the recommendations. For example, one is to have P-flag formatted that idea of support groups for gay and lesbian students. And I went there to see how do you go about
That would
setting
include
that up.
older adults, that would include parents.
Well, I didn't really mean that format,
I
not
see.
the parents.
But just the idea of a support group.
Right. What they call them in a lot of, I think there's 16 schools in Massachusetts, high school is called gay straight alliances. And so if I go to it, I'm not necessarily gay, but I'm not necessarily not. And it's to support kids and to give them a place to talk.
Are other states following the lead of Massachusetts, or even?
Probably incredibly slowly,
Right,
and not that
yeah.
I've really heard of. And it's interesting that Massachusetts is
Sound like the
so
governor
much
was really
farther
behind
ahead.
it.
Yeah,
The governor
very
was quite-
conservative governor. That's kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
something.
But when you look at the statistics of suicide, of drug abuse, you realize these are kids at risk. These are kids at
Right, yeah.
risk, and what can we do? And they're more isolated than any other group. I heard somebody from Harvey Milk in New York give this analogy, which I think is wonderful. If you're part of a religious minority and you're picked on or you're treated poorly, you go home and you have support with your family. You have support in the church or the synagogue or whatever the thing is.
Whatever the
You're not
minority group
alone.
is,
But if
right.
I'm gay or lesbian and I'm picked on, I can't go home and tell my parents. I'm not supported there. So where do I get that support?
Right.
And we don't even have support for, I had a student who was in tears one day just because the family was very afraid. She had an uncle who came out that he was bisexual. And the whole family was shaming him. And she felt that was wrong, but her family had said, you won't talk to anyone. And she said, I feel so alone, and my friends say jokes in the cafeteria about gay or lesbians, and you know, it's not okay, but I don't feel like I can really stand up.
Right, yeah.
So you need sort of a sort of culturally and as a school society, we need to give the message many, many times and in many ways to kids.
Yeah. Well, we're near the end of our time together.
Oh.
But talking about messages,
Yes.
if you had a message for a young person who is watching, what do you think it would be? Like, what do you think is the most important thing for them?
I think the most
to hear from you?
important thing is they're not alone. They're wonderful. They're okay. Being gay is part of you. It's not all of you. We live in a homophobic society. Not that you need me to say that, but there's another side. There's a positive side, and if you hang in there or you reach out, it does get better.
Right. Excellent. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you
It's
for
really
having
great.
me.
And thank you for your wonderful work on
Thanks.
behalf of all of us.
Thanks.
I hope your acceptance is gaining in the whole teacher community. That's great. Thanks for watching Forward and Out. Please send your comments to us at Forward and Out, care of the Loft, P.O. Box 1513, White Plains, New York 10602, or call the Loft helpline at 914-948-4922. You can also ask a helpline volunteer about becoming a member of the Loft. Please support your Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center. It supports you. Stay tuned for the Loft's Community Bulletin Board, directly following the closing credits of the show. Until next time, be proud.